For 75 years, he held on to a dream he thought would never come true. But when that day finally arrived, nothing could have prepared him for how much it would change him. Harold Bennett had always believed some dreams were just too big, too distant, too late. As a boy, he would sit close to the old RCA radio, the kind with the warm glow and crackling sound, listening to every pitch, every home run, every victory as if he were there. He could almost hear the roar of the crowd in his small living room, imagine the hot summer air, the scent of fresh-cut grass, and the electric energy of the ballpark. But that's all it ever was, imagination. He never got to see it for himself. Not as a child, not as a young man, not even as the years rolled by and the world around him changed. Life had a way of pushing dreams aside, quietly, gently, until one day you realized how far away they really were. There was always something else to take care of, always a reason to say, maybe next year. Harold worked hard all his life, never complained. He married the love of his life, raised 2 sons, paid off the house, and did everything he could to be a good man. But while he gave everything to those he loved, there was one thing he never gave himself: the chance to sit in those stands, feel the stadium shake with excitement, and watch his team play not on a screen, but right there, in front of him. And now, sitting in his favorite chair, the same chair he'd watched 1,000 games from, Harold had come to accept that maybe that dream wasn't meant for him. Maybe it was enough to have loved the game from a distance. But what if it wasn't? What if all those years of waiting were leading to something? Because what Harold didn't know, what he couldn't have imagined, was that life wasn't quite finished with him yet. And soon, with just one unexpected question, everything he thought he had missed, everything he believed was out of reach, would come rushing back, more real than ever. It only takes one moment to change a lifetime of waiting. And Harold's moment was about to begin. Harold's days were simple now. He woke early, as he always had, even though there was no longer a job waiting for him. The house was quiet, too quiet sometimes, but he had learned to find comfort in the silence. The morning light would pour into the kitchen, casting soft shadows across the worn linoleum floor as he brewed his coffee, the same brand he'd used for years, always in the same mug, the one with the faded logo of his favorite baseball team. That mug had been a gift from his wife on their 50th anniversary. She had laughed when she gave it to him, saying, "Now you can drink with them every morning." It was a small thing, but Harold cherished it. He cherished all the little things. After breakfast, he'd sit in his armchair by the window, reading the paper, glancing out occasionally at the street where kids used to play, where neighbors once gathered. The world had changed, grown quieter, slower. But baseball was constant. Every season, every game, brought back memories of summers long gone, of evenings spent listening to the crackling radio, of moments shared with people he loved. He remembered sitting on the porch with his father, a warm breeze blowing, the distant hum of cicadas in the air. They'd listened to the games together, his father's deep voice explaining every play, every strategy. It was through those games that Harold learned about patience, about loyalty, about hope. The kind of hope that keeps you going, even when the years slip by. But for all the love he had for the game, the stadium remained a distant dream. He had passed by one once, years ago, on a trip for work. He remembered looking out the window, seeing the tall lights, the massive structure, and wondering what it must feel like to be inside, to be part of something so alive. But the moment passed, as they often did, and he told himself it was enough to love it from afar. Now, at 75, he felt the weight of all those years. The missed chances, the silent promises to himself that one day he'd go. But one day had never come. If you're still here, feel free to subscribe, because Harold's story, and the moment that changed everything, is only just beginning. And little did he know, the past wasn't done with him yet. It was a Sunday afternoon, quiet like most. Harold was in his chair, watching a rerun of an old game, one of his team's classic victories from the 70s. He knew how it ended, every play, every score, but still, he watched with the same focus, the same love. It wasn't about the game itself anymore. It was about the memories it carried. His grandson, Michael, had stopped by for a visit. Michael was in his 30s, full of energy, full of life. He admired his grandfather, always had, But lately, he had started to notice something different in him, a kind of distant look, a longing that seemed to settle in Harold's eyes whenever baseball was on. Michael sat down beside him, watching the screen for a moment before turning to him. "Grandpa, can I ask you something?" he said, his voice gentle. Harold looked at him, smiling. "Of course, son. Did you ever go to a game? Like, at the stadium?" Harold paused, the question hitting him deeper than he expected. He shook his head slowly. "No, never had the chance." Michael frowned, surprised. "Never? But you love baseball more than anyone I know." "I do," Harold said, his voice quiet. "I always have. Just, life got busy. There was always something else that needed to come first." Michael didn't say anything right away. He just sat there, thinking, watching his grandfather's face. And in that silence, he made a decision. The next day, while Harold went about his usual routine, Michael was on his phone, searching. He looked up schedules, ticket prices, seating charts. He called his father, Harold's oldest son, and together they came up with a plan. A week later, Michael returned, this time holding something in his hand, an envelope. "Grandpa," he said, handing it to him, "I need you to open this." Harold looked puzzled, but took the envelope, opening it slowly. Inside were 2 tickets, front row seats for his team's game the following weekend. "What's this?" Harold asked, eyes wide. "It's time," Michael said, smiling. "You've waited long enough. We're going to the game. You, me, Dad, all of us." Harold stared at the tickets, his hands trembling slightly. I don't know what to say." "Just say yes," Michael replied. "Let's make this happen." Tears welled up in Harold's eyes, not from sadness, but from something he hadn't felt in a long time, pure joy. And yet, as the excitement built, so did the doubt. Could he really do this? Could he face the crowds, the noise, the energy of something so big after so many years of waiting? But what happened next would surprise even him. The days leading up to the game felt like a blur, a strange mix of excitement and nervousness that Harold hadn't felt in years. He kept looking at the tickets, carefully placed on the mantel, as if afraid they might disappear. Each morning, he'd glance at them while sipping his coffee, and every time, the same thought ran through his mind. Is this really happening? Michael called him every day, checking in, sharing updates, reminding him of what to expect. "We're something comfortable, Grandpa," he'd say. "It's going to be loud, but I'll be with you the whole time." Harold appreciated it, but deep down, he couldn't help but worry. He wasn't young anymore. The idea of walking through a crowded stadium, finding their seats, standing for the anthem, cheering with thousands of others, it all seemed so overwhelming. And yet, the thought of finally being there, of seeing the field with his own eyes, was stronger than the fear. One afternoon, a few days before the game, Harold decided to get ready in his own way. He opened the closet and pulled out his old team jersey, one he hadn't worn in years. It was a little faded, a little tight around the waist, but as he slipped it on, he felt something shift. Standing in front of the mirror, he adjusted the collar, brushed his hand over the team's logo, and smiled. "You're really going," he whispered to himself. Michael stopped by later that evening with something in a small box. "Here," he said, handing it to Harold. "Thought you might like this." Inside was a brand new baseball cap, the same team, but fresh, clean, just waiting to be worn. Harold took it out carefully, turning it over in his hands. "It's perfect," he said softly. The night before the game, Harold barely slept. His mind was full of images of the stadium lights, the cheering crowd, the players running onto the field. He could almost hear the national anthem, feel the vibrations of the fans stomping their feet, taste the hot dogs and popcorn in the air. And when morning finally came, he dressed slowly, deliberately. The jersey, the cap, comfortable jeans, and his best pair of walking shoes. He looked at himself in the mirror one last time, standing a little taller, his eyes bright with anticipation. Since you're still watching, maybe this story touched you too. Subscribe, because sometimes the best moments in life are the ones we waited the longest for. As Michael pulled into the driveway, honking lightly, Harold stepped outside, heart racing. The time had come. The drive to the stadium felt like no other. Harold sat in the back seat, looking out the window as the city slowly came alive around him. The closer they got, the more he could feel it, the pulse of the crowd, the energy building in the air. His heart beat a little faster with every turn, and when Michael pointed out the stadium lights in the distance, Harold's breath caught in his throat. "There it is, Grandpa," Michael said. "You're almost there." The stadium stood tall, massive, more than Harold had ever imagined. He had seen it so many times on television and photographs, but seeing it in person was something else entirely. The towering walls, the banners fluttering in the breeze, the flood of fans all moving toward the entrance, it was overwhelming and beautiful all at once. They parked and began the short walk toward the gates. Harold took it slow, every step measured, as if he wanted to absorb every second. He could hear music playing from speakers overhead, the chatter and laughter of fans, the occasional cheer as someone called out their team's name. Vendors lined the sidewalks, selling caps, jerseys, snacks. The smell of hot dogs and roasted peanuts filled the air. As they reached the entrance, Michael handed Harold his ticket. "You ready?" Harold nodded, though his voice caught in his throat. "I've been ready for 75 years. They passed through the gates, and suddenly, Harold was inside. The stadium opened up before him like a dream, bright, alive, full of color and sound. He stood still for a moment, taking it all in. The massive field stretched out below, the grass impossibly green under the lights. The stands were filling fast, waves of fans in team colors moving to their seats, laughter, excitement, and the hum of thousands of voices blending into one. Michael guided him through the crowd, helping him down the steps toward their seats. Each step felt surreal. Harold's eyes darted from one corner of the stadium to another, afraid he'd miss something. The scoreboard flashed player stats, music thumped through the speakers, and somewhere nearby, a child shouted in pure joy. When they reached their seats, front row, right near first base, Harold sat down slowly, hands gripping the armrests. He looked out over the field, his eyes misty. "I'm really here," he whispered. And as the players took the field, the crowd rose to their feet, the national anthem began, and Harold stood with them, head over his heart, tears in his eyes. But what happened during the game would make this day unforgettable. The anthem ended, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Harold sat down slowly, still clutching his hat, his heart pounding in his chest. The players jogged to their positions, and the announcer's voice boomed over the speakers, introducing each one with energy that made the stadium shake. Harold recognized every name, every face. These weren't just players, they were part of his life. As the first pitch flew across the plate, Harold leaned forward, eyes locked on the game. The sound of the ball hitting the catcher's glove echoed through the air, followed by another wave of cheers. The energy was electric, unlike anything he had ever felt through a television screen. Here, the sound wasn't just heard, it was felt, deep in his bones. The innings passed quickly, each one pulling him deeper into the experience. When his team got a hit, Harold stood with the crowd, clapping, shouting, feeling the surge of excitement like a spark. When they made a great play, he exchanged smiles and nods with strangers around him, as if they had known each other for years. There was something beautiful about that, about being part of something bigger, something shared. He looked over at Michael and his son, both grinning, watching him as much as the game. "You're really into it, Grandpa," Michael said. Harold laughed, a rich, full laugh that hadn't come out in a long time. "How could I not be? This is better than I ever imagined." Between innings, vendors walked by, shouting, "Peanuts! Cold drinks! Get your hot dogs here." Michael handed Harold a hot dog, loaded with mustard, just the way he liked it. As he took the first bite, the flavors mixed with the excitement in the air, creating a moment so simple, yet so perfect. The scoreboard lit up with player stats, the crowd buzzing with anticipation. Harold felt like a kid again, watching every movement, every swing, every throw. And then, in the bottom of the seventh inning, something happened. The game was tied. The bases were loaded. His favorite player stepped up to the plate, the same one Harold had followed since his rookie season. The stadium grew quiet, a tension thick in the air. Harold held his breath, gripping the armrest, his eyes never leaving the field. The pitch came fast. Crack. The ball soared through the air, high and far, over the left field wall. A grand slam. The crowd exploded. People jumped to their feet, shouting, hugging, high-fiving. Harold stood too, tears streaming down his face, arms raised. He had waited a lifetime for this, not just to see a game, but to feel this moment. But what happened after that was something he would never forget. The stadium was still shaking from the grand slam. The energy in the air was something Harold had never experienced, not through the radio, not through TV, not even in his dreams. He stood there, surrounded by thousands of cheering fans, yet he didn't feel lost in the crowd. He felt seen, alive, connected. Michael reached over and put an arm around his grandfather's shoulder. "You picked the right game for your first one, huh?" he said, shouting over the noise. Harold nodded, his voice caught somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "I didn't pick it," he said. "It picked me." They sat down again as the next batter stepped up, but Harold's mind was still spinning. He looked around, trying to soak in every detail, every face, every sound. The sun had started to dip lower in the sky, casting a warm glow across the field. The stadium lights flickered on, illuminating the players, the field, and the sea of fans. Beside him, a man in his 60s turned and smiled. "First time?" he asked, noticing the wonder in Harold's eyes. "Yeah," Harold replied. "First time. I've waited my whole life for this." The man chuckled. "Worth it." Harold looked out over the field, at the scoreboard, at the players high-fiving in the dugout. More than worth it. They talked for a while about the team, about old games, about how baseball had changed and stayed the same. The man shared stories of bringing his kids to games, of watching his own father cheer from these very seats. And Harold, for the first time, shared his story too. About the years spent listening to the games with his father, about never making it here, about the dream that refused to fade. "You're part of it now," the man said, patting Harold's back. "Welcome to the family." That simple sentence hit Harold harder than he expected. Welcome to the family. That's what this was, not just a stadium, not just a game, but a family of people bound by memories, by hope, by love for something bigger than themselves. As the game moved into the final inning, Harold sat back, relaxing for the first time all day. His team was ahead now, the crowd still buzzing with excitement, but he wasn't thinking about the score anymore. He was thinking about the journey that brought him here, about the faces he missed, his wife, his father, and how, in some way, they were with him now, sharing this moment. Michael handed him a soda, and they clinked their cups together. "To dreams," Michael said. "To dreams," Harold echoed, smiling. The final out came quickly, and with it, the stadium erupted one last time. Victory. The team ran onto the field. Fireworks lit up the sky, and the crowd sang the team's anthem together, voices strong and united. Harold stood, singing with them, his heart full. He didn't want it to end. Not yet. As they slowly made their way out of the stadium, Harold looked back one last time, the field now quiet, the lights dimming. He took a deep breath, the scent of grass and food and excitement still lingering. He had done it. He had lived his dream. But what he didn't expect was how much it would change the way he saw the rest of his life. The car ride home stretched under a sky full of stars, each one twinkling like a tiny echo of the stadium lights Harold had left behind. He sat quietly, his hands resting on his lap, fingers lightly brushing against the folded ticket still tucked safely in his jacket pocket. Every so often, he would close his eyes and see it all again, the green of the field, the towering stands, the wave of people cheering as if they were one. Michael glanced back, concerned by the silence. "Grandpa, are you okay?" Harold opened his eyes slowly, a small smile playing on his lips. "I'm more than okay, Michael. I feel full." It was true. His heart was full, his mind alive with thoughts and feelings he hadn't known for years. As they drove past darkened houses and sleeping neighborhoods, Harold thought about time. How it had slipped past him so easily, unnoticed until it was almost gone. How he had let dreams sit on the shelf, collecting dust while life moved on without them. And now, after all these years, after one perfect day, he realized something that took him 75 years to understand. It was never too late. When they pulled into the driveway, Harold didn't rush to get out of the car. He sat for a moment, looking at the house, his house, the place where he had lived, loved, and waited. Tonight, it felt different. Not because it had changed, but because he had. Inside, everything was as he had left it. The same photos on the wall, the same soft creak in the floorboards, the same chair by the window where he spent so many days watching life from a distance. But now, as he lowered himself into that chair, it didn't feel like a place of waiting anymore. It felt like a place of rest, a place where dreams had been lived, not just imagined. Michael joined him, sitting across the room, giving him space. "Thank you," Harold said after a while, his voice soft but firm. "For what?" Michael asked. "For reminding me that I'm still here, that I can still live." Michael smiled, leaning forward. "You did that yourself, Grandpa? I just gave you a little push." Harold chuckled, reaching into his pocket and pulling out the ticket. He held it up, studying the creases, the print, the memory wrapped around it. "I thought this was the end of the road for me," he said. "One last dream, one last chance to feel young again." "And now?" Michael asked. Harold looked out the window, the night calm and peaceful. "Now I'm thinking maybe there's more. Maybe I've spent too long thinking about what I can't do, and not enough about what I still can." There was a long pause, comfortable and warm. "I want to make a list," Harold continued, his eyes shining. "Not just of dreams I had as a boy, but things I want to do now, while I still can." Michael nodded, his heart swelling with pride. "Let's make that list together." They sat for hours, talking, laughing, dreaming. And as the night wore on, Harold felt lighter, younger in a way that had nothing to do with age. Because when you finally live a dream that you've carried for a lifetime, you realize it's not about the years behind you, but about the moments ahead. The next morning, Harold woke up before the sun. The house was still quiet, the streets outside just beginning to stir. But something inside him was different, a kind of calm, mixed with something he hadn't felt in years, anticipation. He sat up slowly, his body still a little tired from the day before, but his mind clear, sharp. As he stood and walked toward the kitchen, the first light of day crept through the curtains, painting the room in soft gold. He brewed his coffee, as always, but this time, as he poured it into his favorite tea mug, he smiled wider. The coffee tasted the same, but everything else felt new. Harold sat at the table, the ticket from the game still lying there, right where he had left it. He picked it up again, running his fingers over the paper, the edges slightly worn now from being held so tightly. It wasn't just a ticket anymore. It was a symbol, a reminder that even after all the years, all the waiting, dreams could still come true. Later that day, Michael stopped by, as he had promised. They spent the afternoon together, not doing anything special, just talking, sharing memories, and making plans. Harold showed him an old box he hadn't opened in years, filled with photographs, postcards, little keepsakes from a life well lived, but perhaps not fully explored. "I've got a lot of good memories," Harold said, looking through the box, "but I think it's time to make some new ones." Michael nodded, encouraged. "What's next, Grandpa? What's the first thing we put on that list?" Harold thought for a moment, then looked up, eyes sparkling. "I've always wanted to see the ocean. I've never been. I want to feel the sand, hear the waves." Michael grinned. "Then let's do it." The conversation drifted to other dreams, other places, other possibilities. And as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the living room floor, Harold felt a peace he hadn't known in years. That night, before going to bed, Harold sat once more by the window, looking out into the dark. The stars were out again, just like the night before. He thought about the stadium, the crowd, the game, but more than that, he thought about what it all meant. It wasn't just about baseball. It was about living fully, about taking chances, about believing that no matter how many years have passed, there is always room for one more dream, one more adventure, one more moment to feel alive. And as he closed his eyes, he felt something settle in his heart, not regret for the years gone by, but gratitude for the days still to come. Before you go, tell me, what's a dream you've carried with you, quietly, waiting for the right moment? Something you still want to feel, to live, to share? I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if Harold's story touched something in you, if it made you believe just a little more in the power of second chances, give this video a like and join us by subscribing. There are more stories like Harold's, more dreams waiting to come alive. Because here, we believe that it's never too late to dream.